Hey everyone, so you've just finished the iconic Blender donut tutorial? Congrats! But now what? If you're stuck on where to go next, I've got you covered. In this video, I'll show you the perfect next steps to level up your Blender game. Let's jump in and take your skills to the next level. Start by creating something similar to donut, or just create the donut itself with a little bit of your own creativity without watching any tutorial. It will help you to memorize the things that you have just learned. You will find out that you have forgotten many things. Do not worry, you can watch that particular part of the tutorial again to get help. Keep experimenting. Try new things with it. For example, you can add sugar instead of sprinkles, make a half-cut donut, or simply just make another type of donut. You can create something else if you want, but make sure it is similar to the donut, because if you mess up something, then you can just take help from the same tutorial. But let's say you started modeling a car, or a bike, or a watch. They will be much harder to model and will take much more time, therefore you can even quit in midway. So, start simple. For example, you can try modeling a cookie or just simply a piece of bread. Once you have completed this task, you can start to experiment with the lighting. Lighting is very, very important for a render to look good, so try different styles of lighting with the donut scene. Render 5 to 6 images with different lighting every time. Second best thing you can do is start learning about 3D modeling. Follow a good tutorial on hard surface modeling, which covers all the basics. Andrew Price recommends following his Anvil tutorial. You can start with it. It will get you through all the basics of 3D modeling. You will learn about topology, subsurf modeling, and a little bit of sculpting. It will be hard at first. Modeling could be boring for some people, but if you keep on going, trust me, it will be worth it. Once you have created the anvil, or something else, if you were following another tutorial, try to create something similar to it by yourself. For example, you can create a hammer or a wrench to test your skills. By doing this, you can know how much skill you have achieved. And it will also help your brain to remember because you will be recalling the things you just learned. But sometime when you try to start something new, you just feel numb and you don't know where to start. It is very normal. It happens because you forget the things you learned after some time. So the solution is to create the anvil again, or whatever you watched the tutorial on, but this time without watching the tutorial. You can take help in between if needed. Once you have learned the basics of modeling and have practiced 2 to 3 models, you can start to learn a little bit about sculpting. It is really useful in creating organic shapes. Learn the very basics of sculpting and try to learn where it can be used. Do not go too serious with it because sculpting takes a lot of time to learn and requires a graphic tablet to learn properly. Sculpting is a very useful skill to learn. You will learn very basics of it in the Anvil tutorial. Learn it to just improve your 3D models when you are a beginner, but you can go advanced later if you like. I am saying later because learning basic tools and skills first is very important, and sculpting can be hard to learn without this basic knowledge. I highly recommend diving into the sculpting brushes included in Blender and really getting to know how each one works. Take the time to learn and experiment with them because they can be game changers. Some tasks that are tough to pull off with traditional modeling become way easier with sculpting. The magic happens when you combine both techniques. Use modeling to build your base shapes, then bring in sculpting to add those organic details and imperfections that make your models feel more real. Trust me, mastering both will take your 3D work to the next level. I've linked some helpful tutorials in the description to learn sculpting, so be sure to explore them after this video. Learn about texturing. Texturing adds depth and realism to your 3D objects. Very basic texturing is included in the donut tutorial itself, but you should learn more about it by following some other basic tutorials. There are 3 types of texturing: procedural texturing, image-based texturing, and hand-painting textures. I recommend you start with image-based textures. Image-based textures are easier to learn. They are based on real-life images. You will learn about UV mapping in the way, which is also really important, whereas procedural textures are a bit more complex. They are digitally made and can require a lot of time to learn, but they have their own advantages. Starting with image-based textures will be much better. Now, some of you have probably thought, what about hand-painted textures? Hand-painted textures are not very different from image-based textures. As you have probably imagined, hand-painted textures are manually made means you actually have to paint over an image or an object, which then later is converted into an image. So it includes an extra step. Learning it after image-based texture will be easier. Now that you've got the basics of 3D modeling and sculpting down, it's time for the fun part. Head over to ArtStation or just do a quick Google search for some awesome 3D models. Find one that really sparks your creativity, something you'd love to bring to life. Starting with a simple model is a great idea, but hey, if you're feeling ambitious, why not recreate an entire scene? Challenge yourself and see what you can do. This step will really help you improve and figure out what excites you. You will no longer get bored while learning Blender. You'll be having fun and leveling up your skills. After texturing, learn about lighting. It will massively improve your renders. Lighting is essential because it shapes the way we see the entire 3D scene. It enhances realism, tells a story, sets the mood, and directs the viewer's attention. Good lighting can make an average scene look amazing. I mean, really amazing. It will take time to learn, but if you master it, your render will never look bad again. The best way to learn lighting is to replicate the lighting from a photo. Find a reference image with good lighting, find a simple one first, and then try to replicate it. It may not look good in the first try, but keep on trying. You will reach there. Compositing is almost as important as lighting. Compositing is a powerful step in the 3D workflow that allows you to adjust, refine, and enhance your rendered images by layering render passes, adding post-processing effects, and manipulating colors. You can create bloom effect, add motion blur, depth of field, atmospheric effects, and much more. It can give a life to your render. You can render a scene in multiple layers and then later combine it with compositing. It is really helpful if you have a big scene to render. Rendering in multiple layers and then combining it later will put less stress on your PC because it will use less RAM at a time, and it could decrease the render time also. Mastering the skill to optimize your renders will really help you in the long run. Imagine pouring your heart into creating a beautiful 3D scene, adjusting every detail, and finally hitting the render button, only to wait and wait and wait some more. Hours pass. Your computer heats up like it's preparing to launch into space, and you start to wonder if you'll ever see the light of day again. This is the nightmare of an unoptimized render. So, it is really important to learn to optimize your 3D models, scene and render setting as a beginner. Finally, after all that hard work, you can head towards animation. To learn animation, begin by animating simple objects like a bouncing ball or rotating cube. This helps you get familiar with keyframes and the timeline. Learn about the timeline and dope sheet. The timeline shows where your keyframes are set and lets you scrub through your animation. The dope sheet gives a broader view of all the animated properties in your scene, making it easier to organize complex animations. Learning this much about animation should be enough to get you familiar. I kept it last because jumping into animation without mastering the basics of Blender is like trying to run before you can walk. It's just going to trip you up. When you start with the fundamentals, you're building a solid foundation. Animations are all about rendering hundreds or thousands of frames, so if you haven't learned how to optimize your scenes, get ready for long waits and headaches. Now let's recall what we just learned from this video. Do not skip this part, and you can also save the video or write notes to never forget anything. Create something similar to Donut or the Donut without watching tutorial. Experiment different types of lighting with Donut Scene. Learn basics of 3D modeling with the Anvil tutorial by Blender Guru. Create Anvil without watching the tutorial or create something similar. Learn basics of sculpting. Explore every sculpting brush. Learn about texturing and start with image-based textures first. Explore on internet and find a 3D model that you will love to recreate and recreate it. Learn about lighting to enhance your renders. Learn about compositing, then learn to optimize your scenes and render settings, and finally learn basics of animation. Thanks for watching the video. Do not forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this.